Community by Sal Saldana and Adriana Maldonado. She got shot 3 times by a gunman near a school bus northwest of the Pakistani district of Swat. Even though she got shot 3 times, she still remains alive. Malala was the youngest Nobel Prize winner. Also, the person who shot Malala was called Fernahullah. A World at School and partners brought together hundreds of young education advocates from around the world, including Malala. Early life, he served in the British Royal Army when he was 25. He got ranked up so much, he became British Prime Minister. He first served in the British Army, then he got ranked up to Board of Trade, then Home Secretary, and lastly Prime Minister of Britain. Then, during World War II, he was a part of the Allied power to defeat the Axis power. When he died, the President of the United States officially made him a citizen of the United States. Winston Churchill was born November 30th, 1874, then joined the British Royal Army in 1895, then got ranked up to Prime Minister on May 10th, 1930, then teamed up with the United States, Soviet Union, and France, then won the war in September 2nd, 1945.
Sir Winston Churchill was a British politician famous for his leadership of the United Kingdom during World War II. He was also a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, winner of the 1953 Nobel Prize for Literature, and the first person to be made an honorary citizen of the United States. Churchill was born in 1874 in Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, England. His father was a prominent Conservative politician from the aristocratic family of the Duke of Marlborough. Churchill lived in Dublin until he was 6, then attended several schools in England where he struggled academically. He then enrolled in the army and actively sought out military action and began to take an interest in war correspondence. In 1895, Churchill travelled to Cuba to observe the Spanish army fighting the Cubans. He then saw active service in India and Sudan, and was then named as Conservative candidate for the Oldham constituency in England. He was unsuccessful in his political campaign, so he obtained a commission to act as war correspondent in the Second Boer War in South Africa. He was captured and imprisoned in a prisoner of war camp in Pretoria in South Africa, but escaped and rejoined his troops and continued fighting. He then returned to England and published his experiences, and once again stood for the Oldham constituency in the general election of 1900 and won. He retired from the army and was made First Lord of the Admiralty, in charge of the Royal Navy, where he upgraded and modernised the British fleet, but resigned in 1915 after the failure of the Battle of Gallipoli. Churchill then rejoined the British Army in order to salvage his reputation and spent time on the Western Front in World War I. He rejoined the government and was made Secretary of State for War and Air, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1924. The 1930s were known as Churchill's wilderness years, where he opposed the self-rule of India led by Mohandas Gandhi, and made continual unheeded warnings in Parliament about the rise of Nazi Germany and the need for British rearmament. He was again made First Lord of the Admiralty when war broke out in 1939, and when Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain resigned in 1940, Churchill took his place. Churchill refused to surrender to Nazi Germany, and his rousing speeches and tireless work throughout the war hardened public opinion towards the war effort. He built a strong relationship with American President Theodore Roosevelt, and maintained a difficult alliance with the Soviet Union, with the Russians referring to him as the British Bulldog. Many in Britain saw Churchill as a great wartime leader, but not the man to lead the country in peace, and he was defeated in the 1945 election. Despite being in his 70s, Churchill became leader of the opposition, and began to speak openly about the growing threat of the USSR. He was re-elected Prime Minister again in 1951, and resigned in 1955, but remained a Member of Parliament until shortly before his death in 1965 at the age of 90. A state funeral service was ordered by the Queen, and thousands stood in silence out of respect for one of the greatest wartime leaders the British Empire had ever seen.
I have the right to play, I have the right to sing, I have the right to talk, I have the right to go to market, I have the right to speak up.
She's become the voice for girls around the world. In 2011, CNN interviewed Malala Yousafza, a Pakistani girl who gained international headlines 2 years earlier for speaking out for girls' education through a blog she wrote under a pseudonym.
When I see my name in the newspaper, I feel that, yeah, God has given this honor to me and I shall accept it.
Malala's life changed forever on October 9th, 2012. While on her way home from school in Pakistan's Swat Valley, a group of armed Taliban boarded her school bus, asked for her by name, and shot her in the head. Two of her classmates were also wounded in the attack. But Malala's injuries were so severe, doctors didn't think she'd survive. She was airlifted to a military hospital in Peshawar, where she had surgery to remove the bullet lodged in her shoulder. From the UAE to Germany to the US, doctors from around the world offered to treat the young girl. But ultimately Malala flew to the UK, where she continued treatment at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. When hearing about the attack, people around the world were inspired by her courage. Many attended prayer vigils and lit candles. We want justice! Others stood in support of her efforts through rallies, holding up her picture and demanding change. Malala was discharged from the hospital in January and underwent reconstructive surgery a month later. In 2011, when asked why it was important for her to take up this cause, she told our Reza Saya,
when I looked at my people and my school fellows and in the ban on the girls' education and the Taliban, so I thought that I must stand up for my rights, the right of education, the right for peace.
Malala is attending school in the UK, but she continues her fight for education, and worldwide support for her continues despite threats from the Taliban. Vanula Sweeney, CNN, New York.